Back on the SportsMax Zone, talking with interim head coach of the West Indies team, Andre Coley, who previously was on coaching staffs with head coach Otis Gibson, Phil Simmons, and the Australian Stuart Law as well. Former Scorpions coach, won the Super 50 tournament with the Windwards Volcanoes as well. Andre, I was about to ask you this because not many people remember that you actually coached the West Indies under 19s to the World Cup in 2010 to a third place finish there. And that team included players like Craig Brathwaite, Jason Holder, Jermaine Blackwood, who are still part of the setup. Would that primary relationship that you would have had with some of these players from then be a benefit to you now as you go on this tour with them as head coach?
Well, definitely. My relationship with most of the players have changed over the years. You mentioned some of the players from right across the Caribbean. Under 19 players tend to look more to you for direction and so on. As they progress their career, another 5-10 years, they gain more ownership of that. So the way you communicate with them, changes sometimes. But what I've found is that as the years have passed, the respect level has always been there. And we have always been very cordial. And as you mentioned before, I would have worked with a number of these players in different settings, whether it's been at the academy, whether it's been A-team, or in some instances with the senior team.
Andre, the Southern African tour, multi-format by the time you get to South Africa, Zimbabwe, those first 2 tests, is it that only a win will qualify as progress in this phase of the test team's development?
Well, you don't play any series to lose, but winning both series, not just one, but winning both series, obviously really, really important. Obviously Zimbabwe gives us an opportunity to play in Africa again. South Africa were here maybe a year and a half ago, and played us in St. Lucia, and we lost that. So it's an opportunity for us to play them in their environment, and it's a challenge that I'm sure everybody's looking forward to, myself included. I mean, if we are not looking forward to the challenge, then I'll be very disappointed. But I'm very sure that everybody is looking forward to the challenge.
If you're only as good as your last performance, and I'm talking the test team now, you look at what they did in Australia, especially the bowlers. Your assessment of how the team in general trended and how those bowlers performed in the Australian conditions.
Well, I mean, if you think about, there were instances where we really competed with Australia. I think in Perth we did really, really well. But then if you take the overall picture, we were sidelined significantly by injuries to our premier fast bowlers. None of them, being lesser than Jaden Seals, obviously, is spearheading the attack with his pace. And then obviously we had a couple of other guys who weren't available for us. So if you think about that, playing against one of the better teams in the world, and not having your main firepower, obviously we're going to be at a disadvantage. So I think from that standpoint, just giving it perspective, when we had all the players fit, we were competitive. I mean, when you look at the opening stand consistently with Craig and young Tej, you saw that good fight, good foundations were made consistently. So yeah, if you put everything in perspective, I mean, I think we were really hampered by not having our full arsenal at our disposal.
Zimbabwe's cricket has been in serious problems for the longest while. I mean, the country by extension has had its fair share of problems in recent decades. You want the team to cross the boundary rope to play that first test against Zimbabwe, in what frame of mind? To think of themselves as overwhelming favourites and play accordingly, or just to take it session by session? What's the approach, the mental approach to those 2 Zimbabwe games to start with?
I think it's important to know where you stand, be aware of the standards that you want to promote and maintain, and the levels that you want to achieve, the challenges that you want to overcome. So it's very important for us that we are facing that with a confident mindset of being very professional and being at our best. It's going to be very important that we are confident in our approach and that we are expressive, whether it is with the bat or with the ball or in the field. We're going to have to control the game and set the pace in Zimbabwe. That is going to be really, really important for us.
The motivation of the West Indies players. I've heard that question so often by the casual cricket observer, just looking on at the games on TV or reading the match reports. You're close to the machinery, part of the machinery being so. What appears to be the issue with motivating these players who have good ability, almost all of them, but are incapable of putting this ability on show with any consistency?
That's a difficult one in the sense where, I believe massively in perspective. And when you talk about me being around the setup and being within the environment, but, there are times in the majority where, just like you, I'm looking on as a bystander and not necessarily inside the actual dressing room, because what happens on each tour and each tour environment is completely different in some instances from one tour to the next. So I can't speak to the players' motivation just because I am not or haven't been close to it and haven't been there with the players during training, during time when they're away from the field, where sometimes you have a bit of downtime and that's where you can really chat to a player. And everybody has their own intrinsic motivation. I mean, I can't motivate someone unless he himself is internally motivated. I mean, I may know something about him that I know he could benefit from, and then potentially use that to ignite some kind of spark. But I think that motivation intrinsically comes from inside, and wanting to be at your best and wanting to do well, and not be comfortable with the fact that, listen, I've done well in my last performance, so that will carry me over. Having the mindset of being better than I was in my last performance, regardless of how good it was, is definitely something that will keep motivating players. But being on the outside is a different perspective from being inside, so it's difficult for me to actually put a handle on that.
The coach's role, Andre, again, based on what the West Indies fans complain about, and they complain a lot here when the team loses, there seems to be, I don't want to say a misunderstanding, but not clarity in what the coach does. Does the coach tell the bowler how to go about executing his spell over the course of the spell, where to put the ball? Does he tell the batsman what kind of shots to avoid, how to approach a particular bowler? Or is it more broad than that? Is it strategy? Is it team tactics? Is it, okay, if the game is poised this way, we should be trying this if we are in the field. Batsmen, you should be looking to do this. I want to hear what you as coach are setting up to do for this Southern Africa series. What will be your approach? What are those things you're going to get your hands on?
Well, every game requires strategy, and each strategy has its own set of tactics that you look to employ to achieve a certain result. Some players, depending on their level of experience, are able to plan, and all you need to do as coach is to provide the environment where they can actually prepare well. Because they themselves are experienced and know how to do it, and then you just reconfirm what the plan is. But generally, you really want an overarching plan in terms of how we want to play. So establishing that as a team, how we want to play. So if someone was to come and watch us what should they observe when we train? What should they observe when we bat ball field? Is there a theme that should run through that? I think for us looking confident and self-assured and looking together as a team is really, really important because that cuts across everything, whether you're doing well or not. And then just making sure that in all the areas, obviously trying to do our own homework as best as we can, and working out what plans will help us to be successful. So if we know, for instance, that certain players struggle in a particular area, then it's important that we identify the players from our side who can exploit that, or if not exploit it, create enough pressure for a sustained period of time where we could create some mistakes, and then there are times throughout the course of the game where you may have to change. The strategy might be the same, but you may have to change your tactics from session by session. The analyst who might be looking at every ball by ball through the video lens and so on may come to you and say, listen, this is what the guy has done in the last 30 minutes. We may need to adjust this, or we may need to make a slight adjustment to this field placing. So sometimes during the game, it's really the tactics can change. A lot of times, being patient is also a good tactic, and giving the plans time to work. So to answer your question, the short answer, really around discussing with the support staff and the players, which I think is really key, getting from the players how they think, what's the best way of going about this, and then working out together and coming to some kind of agreement with the aid of stats and any trends that are available to back it up, and then just make sure that the whatever strategies and tactics are communicated within the group, and making sure that as much as possible we have the right people who can perform the different roles.
Lastly, Andre, I asked you earlier if what would qualify as success for you winning alone, and you answered that question. I'm going to ask you something related but different. Has Cricket West Indies said to you that for the 2 Zimbabwe games and for the multi-format games that you're going to play in South Africa, you are charged with winning the various series that you played in, or we'll accept this and that for you? Have you been given targets as specific as that by Cricket West Indies?
Well, it's very important that we win, because these series are important. So yes, the aim is obviously to win the series. If you think about the white ball side of it as well, you think about the World Cup in a few months' time. You think about 6 months away. How can we set up how we go about playing in the upcoming ODIs, for instance, to start falling in and shaping how we want to play, for the World Cup. That's one consideration around the white ball side of things. But obviously we're really looking to win both series. Just to go back to something you mentioned, just backtrack a little bit. You said. What was it you said about what I would consider?
What will you qualify as success?
And what did you take from what I said?
No, I took from what you said that the aim is to go for the optimum result, which is of course a victory, and that's right. What you and your coaching staff are focused on. But well, Andre, right. I don't want to give you a rough ride in your first interview, but I just want you to just give me one thing before you go. Have you been given specific targets by Cricket West Indies to work with for the Southern Africa tour?
Well, the discussion, it's interesting that you asked that question, because the discussions are ongoing and we are discussing those targets. Obviously, you talk about targets and so on, and you look to revisit them and whatever. So we are actually discussing those and finalizing those. Because as the information becomes available in terms of our planning and whatever, then we're looking to make sure that we finalize those. So those conversations have been happening, and we are looking. What we want to do is also be very realistic in terms of our objectives. So yes, we want to win. So we want to make sure that all the planning is in place as best as possible. The personnel is in place as best as possible. And then, so yeah, to answer your question, we are finalizing those targets, and we have been discussing what those targets should look like.
Hear you on that. Andre Coley, thank you very much. All the best for you and the team on that trip to Southern Africa, and may you get results that satisfy yourself and everybody concerned at the end of the trip.
All right. Thank you for having me, and good afternoon to your viewers and listeners.
Excellent. Andre Coley, interim head coach of the West Indies senior men's team.
I'm just happy to hear him talk about, in assessing opposition and so on, looking at trends, statistics, how batsmen play, the video analysis assessor contributing to team strategy and so on. Because when we lose, I hear a lot of fans suggest that the West Indies have no plan, and the coaches don't know the batsmen that they're opposing, and they don't have a plan for them. And I'm always saying that these coaches are professionals. They have to. I know that when you look at it, it may appear to you as if they didn't have a plan because of how badly the team may be playing on that day. But I'm always one to say, well, the coach must be doing that.
I know that some people may have groaned at the question, but the question is very necessary for the very fact of what you just said. Yes. People say this. How many times have you heard people say, "Oh, the coach didn't do this, and they have no plan"? Them men have no plan. Them men,
and they don't know these batsmen.
And I'm saying,
and how other coaches, they can see that they worked out what they're going to do, and the West Indies doesn't do that.
And the reason I asked Miguel Cole, Andre Coley, Miguel Coley coaches football. Yeah. Good afternoon, Miguel. The reason I asked Andre that was for him to say exactly what he did. And how many times, Mariah, have you heard our very knowledgeable cricketing public say, how come West Indies coaches, them men don't using laptops? I see the Englishmen on laptop, I see the Australians on laptop,
so why are you
analyzing.
George, why are you using that accent?
Because that's the accent that the criticism mostly comes in.
I don't know what accent is that. But
George, you're a bad boy. George, you're a bad boy.
On that note, team, let's go to a break. Let's take a break. We'll be back.
Thank you for watching SportsMax on YouTube. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and to click the notification bell to stay informed.